Hello, and welcome to the Cybersecurity Leadership Series organized by Cyber Houston. Cyber Houston is a Department of Homeland Security recognized ISAO, that's ISAO, standing for Information Sharing and Analysis Organization. We are live and excited to have you join us today. In this series, we highlight our cybersecurity rockstars and masterminds and bring valuable information to you, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. I am Umesh, Verma, CEO of Blue Lance and the founder of Cyber Houston. We thank our sponsors, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Blue Lance, Reneka Digital, and the University of Houston Downtown for underwriting the Cybersecurity Leadership Series. Now, we love getting questions from our viewers. So if you have a question or comment anytime during the session, please enter it in the live chat section on Facebook or YouTube, and we will then try and answer as many as we can. Also, we are just like anyone else. We love being loved. So show us some love by hitting the like button and cheering us on. And remember to subscribe and hit the notification button. That way, YouTube and Facebook will automatically notify you whenever we are scheduled to go live. Today's topic is, how do leaders effectively manage newly remote teams? Most of us quickly transitioned from exclusively working in an office to exclusively working from home. And now there is widespread uncertainty of what our work environments will look like moving forward. So what are the strategies for moving from an ad hoc working from home to a planned remote work environment? How do leaders effectively manage newly remote teams? More importantly, how do we successfully reach a new normal, even while the world continues to be crazy? Today, we are joined by Mary Dickerson, my good friend, Mary Dickerson, Assistant Vice President and Assistant Vice-Chancellor for IT Security, and serves as the Chief Information Security Officer for the University of Houston and the University of Houston system. Now, UIT Security develops security best practices, coordinates security issues, conducts investigations, reports, and works with UIT and other departments to minimize security risks and assure compliance with security policies and procedures. Mary also serves on both the State CIO Council and the Texas Cybersecurity Council, is Vice Chair of the Texas Cybersecurity Council. She serves on the FBI InfraGard Houston Chapter Board of Directors and is a founding member of the Cyber Houston Greater Houston Cybersecurity Council. Welcome, Mary. It's so great to have you on our broadcast today.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, well, Mary, you know, we've had this chance to be working on civic initiatives for, I don't know now, decades, and it is so fine to be able to have you on this live broadcast.
Yes, we both started when we were toddlers in the sandbox. So just to set everyone's expectations, we've been at this a long time.
Well, you know, Mary, so let me, you know, something that the audience may not and our viewers may or may not know, but you are a certified volunteer firefighter for the state of Texas.
Correct.
And you really literally put out fires for fun after putting out cyber fires at work.
It's true. It's a little bit more actually fun to do the physical firefighting than the virtual firefighting that we do as part of our cyber efforts. And they actually issue us, bunker gear and protective equipment for doing the real firefighting. But, it's all part of a team sport. It's firefighting is a team. You have to back each other up. You have to look for dangers. It's the same thing in the cybersecurity world in that we back each other up, we look for dangers, and we do the best we can for our neighbors.
Yeah, so today you've got the U of H colors on. You're dressed in all red. Next time, hopefully, maybe we have you on. Maybe you can dress up in your firefighter gear.
There you go.
That would be cool, right? So
well,
I have a question.
If we get enough likes, we'll do one just on how firefighting relates to cyber.
Perfect. Um, so, I had a question for you. Seeing that more people are at home, have the number of fire incidents stayed the same or gone up? And how does social distancing play a role in firefighting?
So interesting. Most of our numbers our calls have actually gone down. I volunteer in a very small city right across from NASA, and with people staying home, they're less likely to be out on the roads, and a lot of our calls are actually traffic accidents and things like that. So we've actually had fewer emergency response calls since March than we typically have at this time of the year. As people start getting out more, we start seeing more, but we haven't seen that, as much. As far as the social distancing, it actually presents some challenges for us as emergency responders because we do want to make sure that we are safe and that we are keeping the people that we're trying to help safe. So it presents some challenges, but we've managed to overcome.
Wow, that's kind of interesting because I would have, I guess intuitively one would think that more people are at home, so therefore the incidents might go up. But maybe it's the other way around. More people are home, so there are more people to keep an eye on things, and therefore maybe they catch it sooner. I don't know. Maybe that's a vigilance issue, but it's interesting.
It is.
Um, yeah. So before we dive into the topic at hand, just really quick, what else is new in your life?
Well, I mean, we're all adapting to new work environments and new family environments. So, I've actually found with a spouse that's also working from home and a son who was doing online schooling and parents that are also with us that, we need space. And so even though I'm truly not an outdoors person, I have embraced our backyard and have spent lots of quality time just getting out of the walls of the house. So, and if you see boxes behind me, it's because we've decided to take that to a whole different level and that we're buying a new house that has even more rooms so we can, as we evolve in this new reality, that we can spread out even more.
And that's very interesting because I saw the real estate outlook published this morning, and it was showing that there's just been one of the hottest months as far as buying homes, and people seem to be buying land all of a sudden. The whole move into town now they're beginning to talk about moving to suburbia. It's just interesting. So let's talk about the subject at hand. And so back in March and April, when the work from home orders first started, as a cybersecurity leader and part of the leadership team over at the University of Houston, what was the most challenging aspect of the work from home directive for your team?
Well, it's important to keep in mind that since my team supports the entire system, we do a lot of working remotely anyways. So we are constantly helping out other campuses that may not necessarily be the one where our office is. But the challenge is suddenly everyone was remote and it happened very quickly. So we were supporting other employees of the university system that weren't used to working remotely. And we're trying to adapt very quickly to what they saw as new needs. So they needed an application that would allow them to do conferencing in a different way. Well, the security team still wants to be sure that no matter what you're using, it's still protected and it's still taking the right steps to safeguard the university information. So a lot of vendors were offering free trials of things or, oh, just use it for 6 months, it'll be fine. And security was stepping in to say, well, wait a second, we still need to go through our checklist. We still need to make sure that it is secure before, someone uses it. And so adapting to the whole world being remote instead of just our team being remote was probably the biggest challenge. On a personal note, it was interesting because you can work from home for a day or 2 days and you can sit on your couch or you can, sit, someplace else to do it. But when suddenly this is extending for longer periods of time, the number one request from my team was, I need a better chair. Can I go get my chair from my office? So just an example of we can do anything for a temporary basis. And that's what most remote workers were up until the pandemic hit. And then when that became more of a permanent work environment, we had to change how we viewed where we were working at home and start making arrangements for it to be more office-like, in the sense of a permanent area in the house that was devoted to work, that you could set up with the chair that worked, best for your laptop, the docking stations, the things like that. And, in looking at how we're managing remote teams now, I've really found 4 key things that make it so if you can figure out these 4 things, you get more to the normal environment that I think we're going for. And the first of that is defining what your work environment is. So find an area of your house, find a room that you can set up as your work environment. When you're in that area, that is your work sense, that is your office. Make sure you have the right table and chair and such so that you can effectively do your work much the same way that you would in an office. Don't just be sitting on your couch using the coffee table propped up with, a couple of pillows. That isn't necessarily good for your mindset as far as getting your work done. The second thing would be to come up with a schedule. So I know when the pandemic first hit, we were doing everything possible to try to meet the needs of our users, meet the needs of our faculty and staff. And so we were starting on Zoom calls or Teams calls at 7 in the morning from the time that you woke up until literally you were falling asleep, because we could do back-to-back-to-back meetings all day long. Well, that's great as a temporary thing, much like sitting on the couch working on your laptop, but you can't sustain that. That's not a long-term thing. So coming up with a schedule that I work 9 to 5, and that's when I'm available online for people that need me and to get things done. But at 5 o'clock, I turn the laptop off and I go and get to be, the firefighter or, my other personas within my family, as opposed to just the worker bee all the time. The third thing is really setting people's expectations. So much to I could potentially work all day. The people I work with, my colleagues, shouldn't necessarily expect that I'm working all day. If an email gets sent at 9 o'clock at night, there shouldn't necessarily be the expectation that I'm instantly going to get a response. So managing people's expectations that way. Something that's been very important on a personal level with my team is people weren't actually taking vacation, but because we're state employees, they'll lose vacation if they don't take it by August 31st. So helping people understand that I need you to not be working all the time. Not only do I not want you to lose your vacation hours, but I need you to unplug. I need you to go be something different for a day or 2 days. I need you to have your weekends so that when you do come back into work mode, you're ready to work and you're not burned out and you're not overwhelmed with the never-ending, series of requests that you might have from a work perspective. If we were actually working in an office, then I could tell you, go home. And at least the drive to get to your house would cause some type of mental separation. We don't necessarily have that type of rush hour drive time as you walk down the hallway in your house. So you have to create that intentionally in getting yourself some breathing room. And then the fourth thing, and this is probably the thing that I enjoy the most, you need to make your virtual team personal. Many of us miss walking down the hallway and bumping into someone, or being able to, just grab somebody saying, hey, let's go grab a lunch together. We're not doing that. So we have to create that in different ways. And so one of the fun ways that my team has done it is we created a virtual potluck meeting. So we picked a day that we were going to have lunch together, so to speak. We got everyone to pick out their favorite recipe that they would bring if we were going to have an in-person potluck. We had one person on the team that collected all the recipes and sent them out to everyone. And the assignment was everyone on the team had to pick something out of the list of things that were submitted to make some dish out of that list to make. And then we all, quote, ate together through a Teams meeting that we all joined at the same time. We did talk about some team business that we needed to talk about, but everyone shared what dish they made and they liked it. And so, I got Umesh's, favorite dip, and that was really good. And we all ate together and we all shared it as if we had brought the dishes at the same time. A funny piece to that is there are people in my team that they don't cook. Well, if they were going to a potluck, they wouldn't have cooked then either. They would have either ordered, nuggets from one of our favorite fast food places or something like that. So that's what they sent in as their recipe. And there were people within the group that they went and bought that because that's what they would have eaten. So the virtual potluck is a fun way of trying to recreate some of the things that we used to be able to do in person, and now we need to do in other ways because we still need to have that personal bond. We had one meeting where people took pictures of their work environment at home and shared them. And so you could see where you were working versus where someone else was working. We've had one where our team took pictures of the favorite thing in their house as opposed to in their office. What's the favorite thing that you have in your office and why is it your favorite thing? And so trying to get to the personal side of what we enjoy as being team members is also really important to getting more to the new normal that will be working remotely for more extended periods of time.
So I think that's a really good point. What you're saying is, as leaders, IT leaders, business leaders, cybersecurity leaders, it's really an act of leadership, right? Is to be able to help guide your teams and say, it doesn't matter where you're working from. Maybe your work environment or your place of work has changed. Maybe you're not commuting to work as much, but use that time and use it wisely and invest in yourself and don't give up the me time, because that's very important to stay sharp and stay focused and keep producing at work also. Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. And I was also going to say part of that is, doing enough self-analysis to recognize what is it that you miss the most about going to the office? Is it the interaction with people? And then how can you achieve that in other ways? There are some things that I don't necessarily miss about not going to the office. I don't necessarily miss some of the hecticness of trying to get from one meeting to another. So I can embrace that as, wow, now I have extra time to reach out to, my good friend Umesh and have a phone call because I've got extra time on my schedule necessarily to accommodate that. So recognizing those things that we do truly value about the office environment and seeing how we can translate that into our new remote world.
Mary, I know that Liz, my admin, is watching also. So Liz, take notes, please. As it is, you used to back me up back to back to back. But now, you need to kind of slow down and give me some more time, Liz. So I thought I'd get that in. But anyway, so, you make an interesting point about having a specific place of work, even in your home. How does that affect issues like privacy and confidentiality of information? All of a sudden, we've got 3, maybe 4 people in the house using the same internet. Maybe we're using the same router. I don't know that many of us have segmented our routers, but and also just the sharing of information. I find myself in my office, and I close my door so that my voice doesn't travel all over the house, and then I have my wife's in there in her office, and we're lucky to have these offices, but many and our own rooms. But how about people who maybe have shared space? What advice do you have for them?
Well, I think it's important that even whether you have an actual office or you do have just a piece of a room, that you still have space that is actually defined as yours. So even if it's a corner of a room, make sure that there are boundaries that are established. This is my desk over here in the corner with my laptop, and not anyone in the house should be walking up and sitting at my desk. That my laptop is mine and no one else should be logging into it. That you have separate devices for the other members of your family. In our house, we do have a computer. Despite the fact that we each have our own, we do have one that's like a family computer. But I don't do university business on that computer. I only do university business on my laptop. And that way I can make sure that the proper controls and stuff like that are in place. From a workspace perspective, having that desk that's only your own, papers that are on my desk should not be touched by anyone else. And, with respect within your families and within the other people that are sharing your living space, respect tends to go along those same lines, that you respect their space, they respect yours. The important thing is that you are establishing the boundaries for what is your professional work environment versus what is open to other family interaction.
So let's look at it from the other side, from the employee or team perspective. Have you received any feedback from your colleagues about the current working environments, the remote, on-premise? What are they doing? What are some of their concerns? Of course, let's say that it goes beyond having an ergonomic chair, which is very important, and a place of work. But what are you hearing from your team members?
So it's very interesting because there have been lots of conversations that have come up, many with other Cyber Houston, colleagues and such, as far as what are different employers doing? Are they mandating that people come back to the office? Are they saying we're definitely not coming back to the office? I mean, we heard announcements just this week that some of the big tech companies, Google and others, are saying, their workforces won't come back to the office until potentially next summer. And so I think every corporation is addressing it slightly different. Overwhelmingly, I think the concern is we don't want to force people to come back if they're not comfortable or if there's a chance that it's not going to be healthy for people to come back. But we are recognizing the fact that there are some people that need to be back in the office, either because that's truly where they need to be to do their job effectively, or they miss being in the office. Most people tend to be thinking of oh, wow, we get to work remotely. This is great. This is wonderful. Well, after several months of doing that, there are several people that are saying, I'm ready to go back now. I've had enough of the family environment. I've had enough of working in the corner of my living room. I want to go back to my office with my work environment and things set the way that I want. So I think employers are in a very difficult position. And as professionals, we're all trying to figure out how best to address that. I think until there's a better consensus on what is good health information, do we all continue to stay home? Do some of us continue to go back? When is a vaccine going to be available? Those types of things. I think we're just trying to figure out how to manage the state that it's in. And most people are addressing it the same way that Dr. Couture, Chancellor of the UH system, has said, with compassionate flexibility. So we recognize the fact that we have a mission to do, and we are all doing that in different ways. But we also have to recognize that there are concerns that we don't necessarily know how to address, and we need to be flexible in meeting those needs, both of the mission and of the people.
So that's interesting because you're an state education institution, and I don't know what the latest count is, but University of Houston system-wide got about how many faculty, staff, and students? Around 70,000 or so?
Around 80,000.
80,000.
Yes.
So your job is not a trivial job. And then you add to it all the ancillary stakeholders and sponsors and alumni, and it just grows exponentially, even if you're just taking care of email IDs or provisioning email access. So how does this, let's talk about the student experience and what you're able to share for parents and for students as to what they can expect here in the fall.
Okay, so let me start off by saying that online education, as we had to quickly transition to it during the spring semester, is very different than what is being proposed and planned for the fall semester. During the spring semester, people were reacting very quickly to the fact that we had an urgent health need that we needed to immediately address. So we took, as a University of Houston, we took 6,800 classes online within about 10 days. And that, if you don't know a whole lot about online technology or academic environments, you would help to understand that some of our faculty needed assistance to turn on their computers, while we have other faculty that are designing computers. So we have a very broad range of technical expertise among our teaching faculty. And yet we told all of them, you can't teach online, you can't teach in-person classes starting next week. Everything you do needs to be online. So it was a Herculean effort, both on the part of our staff that supports our faculty, as well as our faculty, to immediately be able to address this need, to the benefit of our students, because we wanted very much, number one, for those students that were on track for graduation, we certainly didn't want to derail or to defer any of their plans, but also for all of our students to give them some sense of normalcy in trying to finish out what they had started at the beginning of the semester. So there was a huge effort to make this happen during the spring semester, and we did it. We did it successfully, and our students seemed to do very well as a result of that. We even put in place a laptop loaner program for those students that didn't have access to technology to be able to complete their classes. So the entire university community really rallied around, we have to make this happen. What we have now, though, with the fall is much more of a planned environment. So much as we saw from a remote work perspective, people sitting on their couch, using their coffee table to do their job, now we're going to a planned work environment. This is a longer term thing, and you need to figure out a dedicated work environment. Similar fashion, we're looking at that for online education. So what we need to do is we need to have much more planned. So we've been working very extensively with our faculty and staff over the summer to make sure that they all have the technical resources that they need. They have the applications that they need to be able to deliver their course content in the way that they want to deliver it, or the way that they would have delivered it had we been able to meet in person. Now, the University of Houston is also committed to meeting the needs of our students who have been telling us that they want to come back to campus. They want the in-person classes. Our faculty are saying many of the same things, but all of that is kind of covered in the idea of, but we're still concerned. We still don't understand what the health ramifications are. We want to come back, but we don't want to come back if it's going to be a bad experience. And so university leadership is listening to this. And so we've adopted several different models going into the fall. Most of them have to do with meeting the students and the faculty where they're at. So some of our classes will be delivered totally online. Other classes will be in what's called a high flex environment, which is parts of the class will meet in person on campus, and other parts of the class will be online and remote. And they will flex to meet the needs of the students and the faculty as the health concerns come and go. We've taken a lot of physical precautions on the campus in making sure that all of our classrooms meet the CDC guidelines for protected spaces and disinfecting and things like that. Our facilities team has been working overtime to make those things happen. Our technology team has been working to make sure that all of our classrooms are fitted for remote learning, so they have the cameras and the things to make the faculty be able to quickly accommodate both online students and also in-person students. So I think, getting back to the idea of compassionate flexibility, we have plans as the University of Houston to get our students back to campus where they want to be, and also address the concerns of those that don't feel comfortable yet being on campus. But we're also still waiting to see what is the latest CDC guidelines, what is the guidance that we're getting from our public health leaders to figure out what makes sense. We don't want to do anything that will cause people harm. And so we will move slowly and deliberately toward providing the services that our community is asking for in a way that also makes sense.
I think, that leads to a question that says, the comment that is that let's meet the student where the student wants us to meet them. I'm kind of paraphrasing. But that would imply that because of the shift in how they're going to be taking their classes, there might be a shift in how the university might view its IT and cybersecurity investments going forward. So from a budget perspective, can you share, or what can you share with our viewers regarding the areas of IT and cybersecurity investments that the university might be looking at with the change in the way courses might be delivered in the fall and going forward?
Sure. So as a state agency, we are under some directives through the state legislature that we are looking at. All state agencies are looking, I believe, 5% budget cuts across the board. As the University of Houston, we're also looking at budget cuts in different areas. Clearly, we have some financial impact from the fact that we do have areas on campus that are suffering because there aren't people on campus. For instance, there's no need to pay for parking if you're not physically coming to campus. So items such as that, auxiliaries that deliver food services and things like that that are impacted by, do they have customers that they are physically serving or not? Those also impact the budget. But we've also seen a shift toward, where do we need to be putting resources? So while we have areas that are suffering because they're not necessarily getting the revenue that they expected with in-person customers, we also are seeing a surge in a need for technology resources. So making sure that all of our faculty have webcams so they can do online learning effectively, making sure that students have laptops so they can access the content regardless of what they may or may not have access to at home. So we are also trying to redirect some of our funds toward the areas that we see the greatest need. And so trying to figure out how we do these different things is important. From an IT security perspective, we were already prepared for a lot of the things that have come down. We had initiatives already in place to further protect user account information, especially from remote access, unauthorized remote access. We've also been looking at some of the biggest threat vectors and putting projects and resources toward those things. So our big objectives, especially for this current fiscal year, from an IT security perspective, did not change. But where we are seeing changes moving forward is, number one, IT security has always looked at where our greatest risk. And we want to make sure that we are in alignment with what the overall organization objectives are, and specifically what our IT team is doing from an operational standpoint. We want to be lockstep with them. So for instance, when wireless on campus was a very big IT objective, there were a lot of resources we looked at from the IT security perspective to support that, to make sure that we were addressing all security concerns associated with that particular environment. Without people on campus, there's not quite as much of a need for our wireless environment. And so a lot of the investments that we were making in security technologies to better support the wireless environment, we are now transitioning toward supporting others in a more remote environment. We've beefed up more of our application security. We've looked at what other technologies are there that really address a much more geographically dispersed constituency, as opposed to focusing on a physical campus environment and protecting that. The bottom line is, it all comes down to managing risk. And so as the organization profile changes, it's important that we are constantly reevaluating our risk analysis of what that looks like, and making sure that we are investing in those areas that we see the highest risk. If that is the same as it is between a physical environment and a remote environment, then great, we're still in alignment. If they are different, that's where we need to shift our funding and shift our investments to better reflect that.
So for our viewers, I'd like to encourage them to go ahead and post their questions if they have questions, and we will ask them of Mary, and we will try and get to as many as we can. So go ahead and post your questions in the live chat box, either on Facebook or on YouTube, and we will get to them. So Mary, let's talk a little bit about your role on the Texas Cybersecurity Council. And as Vice Chairman of the Cybersecurity Council, there's been some change in the last year in the council. And so what can you share with us as to what's new and what we can expect going forward?
Great. So let me give just a little bit of background. The Texas Cybersecurity Council is a council that is managed by the Texas Department of Information Resources. It was initially created at the direction of the Texas State Legislature to address cybersecurity, not for the state of Texas, but focusing more on public-private partnerships, economic development, educational pipelines, things like that, that are broader than just the mission of specific state agencies. And so this Texas Cybersecurity Council is actually made up of representatives from a multitude of places. There are private representatives from industry. There are people representing public municipalities. All different types of agencies are a part of this council. It's led by the Texas Cybersecurity Coordinator, who right now is Daniel Hankins. He's new in this role. He's only taken over the last several months. And like I said, it's administered at the direction of the Department of Information Resources. The goal of this council is to really build on the public-private partnerships at a state level and to bring visibility. The governor has representatives, and so do several of the legislatures have representatives as part of this council, so that not only are they aware of the items that the council is working on, but they can also provide direction toward where this council is going and where are the areas that they want to see cybersecurity efforts focused. So one of the first and most important objectives that they're working on this year has to do with the establishment of a state information sharing organization, or an ISAO. And the goal is to, whether you are in a small city or a K through 12 school district or a private company or a state agency, that you have the benefit of information pertaining to cybersecurity threats and mitigations that the state is also aware of. And so there's been a lot of development in that sense to, number one, build that coalition, understand what the objectives are, figuring out best ways to be able to leverage the intelligence that we're getting, and also to help one another to come up with best practices for addressing some of these threats to more effectively combat them. We know the bad guys are talking. This is our opportunity to do the same.
So it's a very interesting charter for the state ISAO. Cyber Houston, that really kind of leads us to Cyber Houston, and that was originally one of the ideas for building an information sharing and networking community, understanding the community, building a trusted network, have the good guys sit and talk and share ideas, and how do we make things better and share it, especially take the learnings from the enterprise and distill that down into reasonable, digestible, economical sense, and pass that information out to the small and mid-sized companies in order for them, those companies that don't necessarily have the resources nor the skill in cybersecurity, for them to improve their posture. So as part of that effort, Mary, you've been really involved with that effort over the last several years. We've developed the cybersecurity guidance for the board of directors that you and Elizabeth Rogers and several other members of the council were very involved with. We have the cyber preparedness assessment guide, and we have the business vitality guide. And I think we had made all of those resources available to the state and the CIO Council and then the Cybersecurity Council. Do you see this effort where ISAOs like Cyber Houston, which are very regionally focused and very leadership focused, having a part going forward, or do you see the state ISAO making those efforts kind of like, well, it was a great thing to get it started. Now that we've got it started, we should claim victory and there's no need to do this anymore?
No, I definitely see a role for Cyber Houston. And I think it's important to note that, Cyber Houston was one of the first to do many of the things that you just listed. And that was an example for the state of all the good things that could come around a geographical group getting together and really addressing the cybersecurity concerns as a collective team. And so all of those different pieces were best practices that the state is looking at. The state actually linked some of them on their website. So those are things that the state is looking to incorporate. But very importantly, the state is not looking at taking over these different organizations or making them obsolete. Instead, the state is really looking at partnering with these organizations to really build the strength of community. As a council, we're looking at making sure that representation on the council represents all the different geographic areas in Texas, so that we can share the best practices that are going on in the Houston region with those people in the Dallas region or those people in the central part of the state. And so where we can really leverage each other's expertise and best practices, the state as a whole comes out a winner. And that's really what the state is looking at by creating the ISAO organization for the state, is to create a mechanism for bringing these different groups together in a collaborative spirit. So rather than making Cyber Houston obsolete, instead, I think it will be elevating the role of Cyber Houston at the state level and really giving an opportunity to showcase the good work that has already been done and continues to be done as we move forward.
Well, thanks for saying that, Mary. I mean, I don't think I was alluding to the fact that says that Cyber Houston won't exist or the reason would go away, but I was hoping that we would get to the point that says that the state is really working on this collaborative effort and trying to grow ISAOs maybe in different regions, and I didn't know what that vision really was. So that was, I think that there are lots of areas where we can collaborate as we go forward. And so I'd love to continue that conversation with you and the council at the appropriate time. So let's talk a little bit. There is a question that has been posted on from our Facebook page. Vic Malloy, actually, he's with Cyber Texas in San Antonio. He says, what threats have you witnessed related to COVID-19, social engineering, and so forth?
Great question. So we're seeing very similar with COVID-19, what we've seen with other hot topics in the media. So as there have been other events that have gone on, so when a potential hurricane threatens, when the Super Bowl was here, when different events come in, we see hackers taking advantage of those opportunities. Specifically with COVID-19, what we're seeing is many criminals are looking at the fact that everything was very disruptive for several months. No one really knew what standard procedures were anymore, because if you knew what your purchasing procedure was when you were sitting in your office, at your company, has that changed now that you're at home? And so we saw criminals taking advantage of the ambiguity over what was going on and some of the confusion. So I typically only, approve purchase orders when someone brings something to my office and I sign it. Well, I'm not physically signing anything anymore. So instead I got an email that said, hey, would you approve this? Okay, sure, I'll approve it. I guess that makes sense. They must have changed the process because they didn't want to actually send me something to try to figure out how to sign. Well, come to find out, there was no policy that changed, or there was no procedure that changed. Instead, it was a criminal trying to take advantage of that. So we did see, several things like that. And we saw our employees, and that was just a theoretical example, but we also saw employees questioning, I don't know how to do this. If we were questioning it, then you have to know that criminals were trying to take advantage of those thoughts as well. We also saw, and it made the news in several places, people recognize that you could go to the Johns Hopkins website and you could see where the infections were. Well, I know that I can go to the Johns Hopkins site, but Joe user just knows that there is a site out there that has this virus information. Oh, it's scamme.com. Oh yeah, that's of course it. And of course it wasn't that obvious, but there were fake sites that were put up that then you would get an email, or it would be injected into a website, and you knew you were going to a site to check viruses. That's what you intended to do. But the site you were going to turned out not to be the actual official site. So you saw a lot of communications that were going out to people saying, only go to official sites. Make sure if you want CDC information, you're actually going to the CDC to get it, that you're not getting it off of Mary's favorite websites.com, that I list all of my favorite sites because maybe the link that I have isn't the actual link. So we did see an increase in that. We did see an increase in the scams. And our overwhelming message back to our users is, number one, have common sense. If you are looking for official information, go to an official site. Second thing is, just because your work environment is different does not necessarily mean the process by doing something related to work has changed. So make sure you're checking with your business office. Have we changed the procedure for approving procurements? Or be skeptical about something. I just got this thing to approve. I don't typically approve these things. I need to ask. And, don't just send back a thing in the email going, oh, are we now approving it this way now? No, pick up the phone, call someone in your business office, or email it to someone else, not on the email thread that does these things, or is that business owner for that process. hey, could you please clarify this? If your company has documentation posted, making sure you're checking that. Overwhelmingly, use common sense. Think about the fact that you're being asked to, approve money transfer or something like that. Does it make sense that you would be the one to do it? And what has changed in your environment now that would change whether or not there's a company policy about that? Make sure you're following that. So all of our good best practices for dealing with scammers, you need to apply now, even under COVID-19, recognizing the fact that COVID-19 is just the latest thing that the scammers are trying to take advantage of.
So let's talk for a minute about ransomware. As a state-governed entity, I am assuming that the stance is do not pay ransomware. There are some pretty large analyst firms just recently have come out and said that used to be our stance, but now our stance is that it's a business decision and you need to make a decision based on your business. And then Garmin just evidently paid $10 million in ransom, even though, we won't get into that discussion yet because it's premature. But your thoughts around ransomware and how should, especially small and mid-sized businesses, or maybe your suppliers and your vendors that you rely on, what advice do you have for them?
Okay, so I'm going to answer this in a couple of different ways. So first of all, disclaimer, I am not an attorney. I do not play one on TV. This is not legal advice. My general understanding is that as a state agency, it may be against Texas state law for a Texas agency to pay ransomware because it's considered extortion and would therefore be in violation of the law. I don't know that for certain, and any official university things would need to come from our general counsel, so I am not speaking on behalf of the university in that sense. But the reason I bring it up is that would be a consideration as far as whether your company or your organization is allowed to pay the ransom. So it may not be a discussion for your organization if it's considered illegal and therefore not under consideration. I also know that there are certain cases that there are federal laws as far as what types of ransomware ransom or other types of monetary retribution can be given to different entities. So that's something for a legal discussion not to be had with me. In general, though, keep in mind the fact that, number one, the reason the ransomware is an issue is because the criminals have stolen information that belongs to you and you want to get it back. So my first thing to you is don't put yourself in that position. Protect your data. Make sure you have valid backups of your data. Put the right controls and protections in place so that, you know what, if you steal it, I'm going to deal with the fact that you shouldn't have broken into my systems, but I don't need to pay you money to get it back because I have backup tapes and I have that information and you can't hold me hostage by having it. So make sure you have the right protections in place so that you always have access to your data. The more protections you put in place so that people can't steal it, even better. But make sure you've got control of your data. That's the first thing in ransomware. Second thing is, think about this from a logical perspective. You have data. Someone steals it from you, so clearly breaking the law. They say, if you pay me $10, I'm going to give it back to you. Okay, well, first of all, how do you know that they really will? So if they don't, you've just paid $10 to someone that you can't easily identify because you probably don't know who the cyber criminal is. They're just someone out in the wild blue yonder. So you're going to pay money to an unknown entity and trust that this honorable person that's breaking the law and stealing your data is really going to give it back to you. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is, how do you know that they're not making a copy of it that they are also going to sell on the dark web? In which case, you're not dealing with one criminal with your information. You're dealing with a whole bunch of people that potentially have your information. And depending on what they've stolen and the value of it in the market, they could have several buyers for it. If it's credit card data or social security information, all of that type of stuff has very high value on the dark web markets, in which case more people are going to be profiting off of your loss of data. And while you may now have a copy of it back, so does everybody else. And now you have to do breach disclosures and notifications to individuals. You have concerns of identity theft and things like that. And then the third piece to all of this is, even assuming that you have trusted this honorable criminal to give you your data back in exchange for $10, and you're hoping that they're not going to turn around and make a copy and sell it other places. The word on the street is that your company has now paid ransomware to someone to get your data back. That is like putting a big target on your company that says, guess what? They're willing to pay to get their data back. So now I'm going to spend my time hacking your systems or trying to hack your systems so that I can also steal data, so that I can also hold it for ransom and make money. Because if my buddy made money off of you, I can make money too. And so you have set yourself up now for an increased level of cyber attacks, increased people trying to get to your information, and they're going to be less likely to negotiate with you because we know you paid it before. So number one, we're going to ask for even more. And two, we're going to keep holding it because we know you're probably going to end up paying it in the end because you don't have a choice, or we don't think you have a choice. So my recommendation is that you don't pay the ransom. Clearly, you need to get advice from your attorneys and the law enforcement personnel that you may be working with. Your particular situation may be different. But my overriding recommendation to all of you is make sure you're not putting yourself in that position by making sure that you have valid backups of the information that is critical to your company, that you have those protected, and that you have the right cyber resources in place to, if you have an intrusion, that you are able to quickly detect it and take additional steps to protect your data.
Wow, what excellent advice. And thank you for sharing that. That's very, very thoughtful. Prior preparation prevents poor performance. That principle of 5 Ps, think ahead of time, put the proper controls in place, don't make sure that the data that you have a good valid backup, and just think through all of those issues ahead of time. And you laid out a whole list of, I thought it was going to be a simple question, but you just laid out a thorough analysis of it, did a really deep dive on it. Really appreciate that, Mary. Thank you so much. I'm sure that our
by now, Umesh,
viewers,
a simple question with respect to cyber.
it just shows that that you deal with these kinds of issues day in and day out. So, Mary, we have a few minutes left, and I'd like to kind of talk about Cyber Houston and the Houston Cyber Summit for a moment. So, you are also co-captain for, Cyber Houston puts on this annual summit of the Houston Cyber Summit, which is a platform for leaders to come together in cybersecurity and talk about leadership issues and disseminate information of what we have worked on throughout the year into the community. And and you are a co-captain on the Houston Cyber Summit Content Planning Committee. So that summit was scheduled for April and is now just recently been postponed to October. It was postponed till October, but the planning committee has just made the decision to have it as a virtual event in October and not a physical event. Kind of excited about it, but kind of also a little worried about it. Do you have any thoughts you would like to share with our viewers?
Sure. So I think, in the discussion that, my colleagues and I had about this, really it came down to, we really wanted to get together. We thought it was important to bring the community together, especially during October. It's Cybersecurity Awareness Month. I think we're all hoping that we can get back to the new normal or more of a stable environment by October. But there's also the overriding concern of, health. And we certainly wouldn't want to hold an event that would be an in-person event that people would be hesitant to join or would be somewhat concerned in being a part of. And so recognizing that and realizing that, for most of us on a professional level, commitments to attend events in the next, couple of months are somewhat sketchy, both from a financial perspective and a logistics perspective. Companies aren't necessarily willing to sign off on people going even to in-town events because of, the entire concern in the environment. So it was important to bring the community together. We thought that we could do that really well with a virtual event in October while still maintaining, our key flag event in April. So in the spring, we will still have, our big, actual summit. We're looking forward to that a lot, but we really wanted the opportunity to bring the community together in October in a virtual sense, build off of all the good energy that we all have. Like I said, hopefully by that time we've gotten to a more stable environment that is considered new normal. But at the very least, we will be able to leverage our experiences, share our best practices, and, take one more step toward that, better environment that we're all looking to achieve. And then we can look forward even with more excitement to our actual in-person event, hopefully in April.
Well, Mary, thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. It's always a delight, always enjoy meeting you in person. And I hope that this COVID situation gets behind us fairly quickly so that we can sit down and have our salad and soup together. Like you mentioned, that you like that and I like that too. But thank you for taking the time out of your busy day and sharing your expertise with us today.
Well, thank you. I appreciated the invitation. I love the opportunity, Umesh, to visit with you any opportunity I get. But I will say that while I enjoy doing this, I miss seeing everybody that's virtual right now. So hello to everybody out there. And we will look forward to a more participatory environment with videos and stuff like that in October for the virtual summit. So in the meantime, this has been a great way to spend a few hours.
Well, thank you again, Mary. And for our viewers, we will be posting the presentation to today's presentation to the Cyber Houston YouTube channel, as well as to the cyberhouston.org website. So if you feel like these broadcasts are valuable to you and you would like to stay in the loop, please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow our Cyber Houston Facebook page. Cyber Houston is a coalition of businesses. Really, it's volunteer businesses, cybersecurity, academic, government, and civic leaders. Our goal is to continuously educate and inform business leaders on how to manage and govern cybersecurity risk. We take lessons learned from our enterprise members, distill them down into sensible economical guidance to help small and mid-sized businesses improve their cyber posture, build resilience, and become better and stronger suppliers back to the enterprise. All our work is done through the lens of helping SMBs grow their business, and it's all through civic leadership and volunteerism. This guidance comes to you in the form of the Business Vitality Guide, guidance for the Board of Directors, the Cyber Preparedness Assessment, and the free Cyber Scan. All of these resources are free of charge and can be found under the Resources tab on the cyberhouston.org website. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and a very special thanks again to our sponsors, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Blue Lance, Reneka Digital, and the University of Houston Downtown for underwriting this series. Mary, once again, thank you for joining and for sharing your expertise, your deep expertise with us. With that, remember to join us on Wednesdays from 11:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Central Time for our weekly Cybersecurity Leadership Series. Be safe, stay healthy, and have a great day.